Hey guys. This is part 3 of What If Kakashi Went Back in Time and Was Overpowered. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 9. It came in the middle of the night, borne by a fresh-faced genin who'd been paid 50 raya by a man in a mask to deliver it straight to Uchiha Fugaku, no questions asked. Fugaku opened it up with shaking hands, Tomo of his Sharingan spinning as he checked for tags, seal marks, chakra signatures, any hint or clue at all. There was nothing, only plain string and brown paper covering a plain white plastic box with an ordinary containment seal. It was strangely cold. Father, are you sure? Fugaku silenced Itachi with a heavy wave of his hand. Mikoto hovered by the doorway, kunai held expertly in one hand and chakra gathering in the other. None of them slept easily now. With strangely calm hands, he broke the containment seal with a swipe of his thumb. The box hissed, and cool mist rose from the edges of the lid that were revealed in the absence of a working seal. 3 pairs of swirling red eyes tracked the movement of the fading fog, burning the impermanence into unforgettable memory. Only water vapor with a slight hint of chakra, too faint to be anything but a brief flicker of blue, and then nothing. Fugaku opened the box. The Sharingan cut straight through the sudden rush of cold mist, and revealed the lump of flesh lying on a bed of ice, white and dotted with clumps of congealed blood. There was a dull thud and Fugaku looked up, Mikoto's ghostly pale face etched into his vision. For as long as he lives, Fugaku will always remember the look on her face, the little O of her mouth, the kunai buried to the hilt in the floor, the faint fluttering beat of her heart pulsing in the hollow of her throat. That's Sasuke's ear, Itachi whispered, horrified. His hands were no longer calm. They were shaking now, trembling violently like leaves shuddering in face of a vengeful wind. He picked out the little placard placed next to Fugaku shuddered, mind refusing to comprehend. It was cheap rice paper, sold in stationery shops, a penny for 100 sheets. Fugaku held it up to the light, paper shaking so badly he could hardly read what was on it. Itachi's hand braced his arm, forcing it to steady. The ink was a dull, rusty brown, the color of dried blood, Fugaku slowly realized. There was only a single character, written with a steady hand, brush strokes clean and precise. Yield. There was only the silence, cold and quiet and as heavy as Kakanai's flak vest, swallowing him up with its emptiness. Naruto wanted to break it, wanted to paint the walls of the room a bright, loud orange, scream and shout and ruin the silence and laugh and leave the room and play with Ryu-chan and Sasuke and Sakura. Instead he stayed in the corner of the room, watching the painted pictures on the walls glow and fade, black flashing into blue and back to black again. An old woman sat in front of the rice doors, white head bent over her knitting, needles flashing like fish scales in her hands. She had walked into the room with him, her bony hands strong as she shoved him into the room and lit up the painted words on the wall with her katra, like Kakashi and Ai-san had shown him once. But normally the painted words in the apartment only lit up when Naruto wanted to come inside and he had to unlock the door with his hand on the special picture. I want to pee, Naruto said loudly, just because, even though he didn't really need to at all. Hush, demon brat, the old fat granny said, not even looking up from her stupid knitting. She was just like the rest of the grown-ups, calling him mean names and glaring at him, and Naruto wanted to scream and make her see that he was Uzumaki Naruto, the greatest prankster in the world and Kakashi and Ai-san's younger brother. Is Kakashi and Ai-san back yet? Naruto demanded, heels drumming on the floor, just to make some noise. Boy, the Hataki should be the least of your concerns right now, the old granny snorted, voice old and croaky and sounding like it had come straight from the fairy tales about old witches living in the forest. I don't like you, Naruto said and slammed his foot down extra hard and didn't even make a face even though it hurt a lot. I want Shisui back again instead of you. At least Shisui had talked and played with Naruto, and the two of them had drawn pictures together of Naruto's super cool Hokage outfit that he was gonna wear when he was a super S-ranked ninja. But Naruto could see how tired Shisui-kun was, with great dark smudges under his eyes and his face so pale and white. Even for an Uchiha, Naruto accounted himself a regular Uchiha expert by now, having lived with them for weeks and weeks and weeks. Uchiha were normally rice paper pale, and when they were in the sun, none of them ever got brown like Naruto, but a blotchy shiny red that peeled, and then went straight back to being white. Sasuke's family, Naruto thought, was kind of weird. Once, Naruto had asked him about the search going on outside and Shisui had only smiled a smile that wasn't really one at all, and held Naruto close to his chest, so tightly that Naruto felt like he was going to burst. He didn't complain and only listened as Shisui said that they were trying very hard and if Naruto could just be a little more patient, he would only have to stay hidden away like this for only a little bit longer, so he wouldn't go missing like Sasuke. Sasuke! Naruto curled up into a ball, knees tucked in close to his chest, and put his head down. He'd been waiting for so long, first for Kakashi and Ai-san to come back, and now Sasuke was gone and Naruto was stuck inside this stupid tiny room with the glowing pictures and the old fat lady, and he wouldn't cry. He was a big kid now and big kids didn't cry. TCH, the old woman said, and she put down her knitting for the first time since she'd walked into the room and hobbled over to Naruto, back bent and curved like an ancient tree. She produced a clean white handkerchief from the depths of her kimono and scrubbed Naruto's face roughly. "Blow, little brat," she commanded, holding it over Naruto's nose, and Naruto blew so loudly that he honked like a goose. He giggled and the old woman sniffed, putting the dirty hanky away. "We'll find him," the old granny said, and she sat down all proper like Fugaku-san made them sit for meal times. "And Hatake will come back for you." "But how do you know for sure?" Naruto asked, looking down at his socks. They were his favorite, with little green frogs dancing all over the orange background. Kakashi and Ai-san had gotten them for him when they went on the big shopping trip after he told Naruto that they were going to be living together. "Because I am very old and I know many things," old granny said, wrinkly prune lips pressed together. "And I also know that it is past time for you to do your hiragana homework." PFFBBBBBKKTT. Naruto blew air out from his pursed lips, puffed up cheeks slowly deflating. "I hate homework," he muttered. The old granny gave him a mean look and Naruto grumbled, but started inching over to the work table in the far side of the room, dragging his butt slowly over the floor without ever quite raising it. "Walk," the old lady said, her voice very stiff and cold. Naruto continued to slowly scooch his butt. "Demon brat!" Naruto jumped up and pointed a finger at her. "My name's Uzumaki Naruto, and don't you forget it!" he shouted and stamped his foot. "Not demon or brat or anything. I'm Naruto." They stared at each other for a long time, Naruto growing redder and angrier and also maybe a little scared, but Ninja didn't ever back down, and he was gonna be the best of them all. "Uzumaki," the old granny finally said, and she looked away. "Go do your homework." Naruto stomped over to the desk and pulled his chair out and sat down very hard. Then he winced because sitting down very hard hurt a lot, so he rubbed his butt. The pictures he drew yesterday were still all over the desk, and Naruto picked his favorite one up. It had him and Sasuke and Sakura all standing together, not holding hands because that was for girls, and Kakashi and Ai-san in the back, extra tall and smiley with his eye. Shisui had helped him with coloring in everyone's hair, especially Kakashi and Ai-san's gray spikes. "Come back soon," he whispered at the picture of his family. There was no window, only the steady flame of a single candle that flickered briefly when Itachi walked in, reeking of sweat and ozone. Dark eyes, nearly the same as his own, looked up and briefly flashed red before settling back to their normal black. Shisui slowly pulled himself up from knees, exhaustion etched into every line of his body, fine wrinkles marring his pale brow. "Shisui," Itachi acknowledged and put a gentle hand on his cousin's shoulder, stopping him from getting all the way up. "Thank you for coming." "You called," Shisui said simply, the barest hints of his normally bright smile tugging at his mouth. "So I did," Itachi said, settling down and Saiza next to Shisui, their knees almost touching. The ancient holy tablets seemed to glare down disapprovingly from the walls, fading strokes of black ink painted on wood that had been considered old before the thought of a hidden village was first conceived. "Is there?" "I have a noise-canceling genjutsu in place," Shisui nodded. "Speak freely, no one will be able to overhear." "Good." Itachi breathed in deeply, chakra drawn up deep inside of him and filling up his chest with flames that begged to be let out. "I have met with the Hokage, and?" Shisui's head jerked at Itachi, black curls spilling wildly across his face. "He suspects as we do," Itachi said, fingernails digging into the hard bone of his knees. "That Danzo is behind his disappearance." "Suspect," Shisui hissed, and the candle flame guttered, casting strange shadows over his cousin's pale face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. "We know." Itachi thought of the soft curve of Sasuke's ear, white with frost and dotted with old blood, resting in a small box. "Yes," he said very softly. "The illusion that Danzo has cast is very strong. He drives fear and madness into all of us," Shisui fans the flames that were already growing out of control. "He's using Sasuke's disappearance to drive us over the edge, exhausting and turning the Uchiha against the village. It's an illusion that no Kai or sharp edge can break. Because it's real," Shisui said, voice breaking. "Aniki's the best." "I've been asked to infiltrate Root," Itachi said and closed his eyes. "You don't mean Danzo?" Shisui sucked in a sharp breath and he broke Saiza, reaching out to grip Itachi's shoulder. Itachi, do you even know what? Itachi opened his eyes, half-hooded lids revealing bloody red pupils, Tomo spinning lazily. My intention is to find Sasuke, and should it come to it, to kill all those who would threaten the peace of the village. He drew in a ragged breath, fire deep inside of him growing until it felt as if everything inside was turned into nothing but ash and dust. You can't tell me that the Hokage would ask something like this of you. Itachi could see Shisui's breath curl in the air as he hissed, waves of heat flickering from behind lips bitten down to bloodied flesh. I will do whatever I can for my brother, Itachi said, looking straight ahead at the massive engraving of the Uchiha fan under the holy tablets, carved with painstaking attention to detail. And if it means losing myself, so be it. Shining sun of our people, I give myself unto you and pray that this unworthy one is payment enough. Amaterasu, divine radiance of the heavens, destroy this darkness and return my brother. I can't let you do that. Itachi's control over his Sharingan snapped, the mundane world crashing back down on him, fate lines of the world dissolving into thin air. What? You're the future head of this clan. You can't risk yourself like this, not with Sasuke already missing. Shisui's grip moved from Itachi's shoulder to his hand, his fingers tangling with Itachi's. His skin was feverishly warm and sticky with sweat. I won't let you do that to yourself, Shisui said fiercely. I won't let you destroy yourself trying to keep the damned village together. Itachi swallowed, thoughts moving slowly, adrift in a sea of thick honey. It doesn't matter. It matters to me, Shisui said, grip tightening, eyes bright. Threaten the peace? You know, even better than I do, how fragile the clan is right now, especially with Sasuke's kidnapping. One wrong move and we'll be at war with the village, and Danza has no better excuse to put us down, like we're all a pack of rabid dogs. You can't tell me that it wouldn't be your job to stop that from happening, even if it means killing your family. Itachi shook his head slowly, Shisui's voice ringing in his mind, drowning out all other sounds but the sweet chime of his words, intoxicating and deep with power. Shisui. Itachi's Sharingan slowly unfurled in his eyes, instantly cataloging Shisui's trembling face, the chakra burning bright in his fingers, tracking the flow of chakra from his cousin's body to his own. Release the genjutsu. Shisui drew back, giving Itachi a crooked smile. I had to try, he said, and pulled his fingers back, ending the illusion. The cotton wrapped around Itachi's head slowly dissipated, and he found that he could properly think again. Why would you do this? Shisui's smile slowly faded away, and when he reached out again, Itachi saw that there was no trick, only Shisui's hand gently cupping Itachi's face. Let me go in your place, Shisui said, as if that were answer enough. Itachi tasted ashes and dust. And if I said no, then I'll knock you out and go anyway. Shisui's eyes bled red, and Itachi saw the pale reflection of his face mirrored in Shisui's circling Tomo, Sharingan reflected in Sharingan. I'm better suited for this job anyway. I'm stronger than you in Genjutsu, and Danzo has no reason to suspect anything from me. Better suited to kill clansmen? You're needed to lead the resistance, and convince the elders, Shisui said quietly. I'm just a branch kid, blessed with the favor of the main family and a gift for party tricks. I'm replaceable. Shisui's fingers tightened, the tips of his nails pressed against Itachi's cheekbone, tiny pinpricks of pressure. You're not. Itachi jerked his head away and out of Shisui's reach. You're not giving me much a choice. I'm sorry. Itachi closed his eyes, the fire in his chest burned out, and nothing remained but the scorched wasteland where his heart used to be. Go, he said raggedly. Thank you. Itachi turned his head away, his fingers digging into the hard muscle of his thighs. Get out. Shisui left, leaving Itachi alone in the dark room, with only the silent holy tablets looking on. They said nothing as he sat in perfect seiza, tears slowly, steadily dripping down his face. They left Hiroki his life and not much else. Kakashi kept an eye on Radia as Gunma tended to the boy, hands glowing a serene bluish-green that radiated in bursts from his hands. Tenzu kept himself busy in the field, a troop of clones busy repairing the earth so it looked less like a war zone and more like a normal training field. How much longer? Just give me a couple more minutes. Gunma's voice was strained, and Kakashi could only imagine how pale his face was underneath the implacable porcelain mask, carved in the form of a howling wolf. Kakashi kept a constant finger on Radia's pulse, too fast and weak for his liking. His skin was cold and pale from blood loss, but he was breathing regularly, even if his chest rise was a little shallow. Kakashi took what good news he could get. I've done the best I can. Gunma drew himself back onto his feet and staggered a little, waving off Kakashi's attempt to help him up. I'm fine. Just. He barked out a rough laugh. This fucking mission? Kakashi pressed a hand against Hiroki's bare forearm, sending out a pulse of chakra. There was only carnage underneath his fingertips, chakra coils torn and shredded like wet tissue paper. It was convincing enough to pass off as a jutsu backlash, chakra exploding in Hiroki's coils after a misformed attempt to try out a higher level technique. This is very good work. He would never be able to form another jutsu again. Genma rubbed the back of his neck, tilting his head in appreciation. Yeah, well, you can thank me by taking us all home, Captain. Kakashi stood up, absent-mindedly cracking the joints in his fingers. Cat, leave it as it is, we've got to get moving back to home base. Tenzu looked up from his perch on a slowly growing boulder, where he'd been shaping it to his precise specifications. He'd managed to stay away from Hiroki's body since the fight, contenting himself with surveillance and clean-up duties. We're going back to the square. We have to maintain our cover. With Gari reported missing in Hiroki's freak accident, they're going to be suspicious of anyone who leaves IWA in a hurry. They're going to swing by to interrogate anyway. We're fresh-faced foreigners from Lightning Country. Genma shifted his mask enough to swig from his canteen. I can't wait until we're out of this damned hellhole. The strip of skin visible was pale and shiny with sweat. How are we going to explain Tiger's injuries? Tenzu asked, leaping off his rock and trotting over. He stopped a good 5 feet away from Hiroki, never glancing over at the body on the ground. We're not special intel operatives trained to maintain a cover under this kind of pressure, Kakashi said quietly. We may have to rely on the Liar's Palace. Cat's fist tightened, the only sign of his discomfort. Oh, try to contain your enthusiasm, Genma tried to joke, but it fell flat. The corners of his smile never reached his eyes. For what it's worth, Kakashi paused, throat working. He looked down at Radia's still body, wrapped in spare blankets and covered in aluminum bunting to keep in heat. Normally, Radia was a sprawl of limbs when asleep, a mountain of a man with giant feet sticking out from under a blanket that barely covered his ankles. There was nothing normal about him now, lying down ramrod straight, blood seeping through hasty bandages. I never intended to draw his attention to our team like this. We know, Genma said not unkindly, but the corner of his mouth twisted downwards, and Kakashi looked away, unable to bear looking his subordinate in the eye. Let's get going, Kakashi said, clearing his throat, and bent down to carry Radia in his arms. He was heavier than Kakashi remembered, a messy tangle of long limbs and mangled bits of plate armor. He carefully avoided looking at the half-healed remnants of Radia's chest. You alright, kiddo? Genma asked, slinging his medic's kit over his shoulder with only a slight wince. Tenzu wrenched his gaze away from Hiroki's sleeping face and turned the face of his implacably smooth cat mask over to Genma. Yes, he said calm. Seals on 3, Kakashi said and closed his one good eye, tasting ash and dust in his mouth. IWA Military Police. Kamui knocked against the granite wooden door, stone rippling outward from the epicenter of his fist. Shizuka chewed absently on her toothpick, riffling through the papers the office monkeys had passed on to them on the way out. They must be piss-fucking poor if they're squatting in old Genjihara's dump. They're from Lightning. They probably don't the difference between a hovel and a garbage dump. Kamui snorted and knocked again, hard enough to shift the grain of the stone. Besides, the Ministry of Imports probably billeted them here so they can pocket the difference and buy whores with the extra money. You have such a way with words, Kamui, Shizuka said drily just as the door slid open, revealing a pale-faced young boy with large round eyes and hair messily tied into a topknot. How can I help you, sir, ma'am? He asked politely, eyes widening a little as he took in the police insignia embroidered onto the front of their vests and chakra sticks hanging off their belts. We're here to ask a few questions regarding an incident that occurred a few hours ago in the village, and we have reason to believe the culprit is around the area. Shizuka reeled off, adopting just enough of a hard and polished tone that the boy automatically straightened his back. Of course, the boy said. I don't know what's going on, but if you would like to come inside, I can get Ichiro and I to answer some of your questions. Much obliged, Kamui smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth and several gaps in his smile. The boy flinched a little at the sight and Shizuka gave him a slight kick, annoyed that he was frightening the little kid. Kamui smiled even wider, enjoying the reaction. It never got old. They were politely seated in a tidy, though cramped sitting room, stuffed with boxes and boxes of what Kamui assumed to be filled with fabric, and whatever the hell the merchants were selling. Sorry about the mess, the boy apologized, clearing off a chair and kicking aside a box full of receipts and papers. We're packing up to leave soon and it's gotten a little bit crazy. Not a problem, Shizuka said easily, kicking back in the chair and giving the kid a smile. Nice place you got here. Poor bastard flushed to the tips of his roots and mumbled something before scurrying out of the room, presumably off to find Ichiro and I. And you kicked me for smiling at the kid, Kamui muttered. You have no sense of mercy or fairness. Your smile isn't exactly the pinnacle of beauty, Shizuka shot right back. Yeah, well, I could say the same of yours, Kanria said and dodged a half-hearted punch to the arm. Their argument was cut short by the arrival of Ichiro and Ai, hair slicked right back in the style that lightning country men favored, stinking of camphor grease and an overpowering cologne that made Kanria's nose itch. He looked pale and overworked, dark circles coloring the skin under his eyes. It's an honor to meet you both, Ichiro said, exhaustion making his voice rough. My apologies for the wait. Quite all right, Shizuka said, leaning forward in her chair and giving the new boy a look up and down and sideways. You must be Ichiro and I. Yes, that's me, Ichiro said, settling onto a ratty-looking footstool and running a hand through his greased hair. Raya said you had some questions about some incident or another? Several hours ago, an important member of our community and his student went missing. The student was eventually found, but he's severely injured, and his master is still presumed to be missing. We believe that the culprit fled to this general area, judging by the evidence we have so far. Ryu, the boy who met them at the door, popped his head around the corner and colored a little at seeing Shizuka's face. Kenryu winked and made sure to flash his tattooed arms, enjoying the way the boy's face whitened. This is the first I've heard of anything like this. Ichiro shook his head and he looked truly regretful. Kenryu read nothing but pure stinking truth on his face and scratched the left side of his nose to let Shizuka know. I'm afraid I'd been home all day and a good part of last night, so all of this is news to me. If I may ask what you were doing? Shizuka asked delicately, while Kanria flexed his muscles to look as threatening as possible in the background. No need to let anyone know he was anything more than a dumb piece of hired muscle. My cousin and our hired bodyguard seem to have come down with food poisoning. Ichiro sighed and his shoulders slumped. I've been up all night cleaning up after them and trying to get their fevers down. Shizuka clucked her tongue. My sympathies. You can send them to Genjihara after I'm done with him, Ichiro frowned. It's the damned food they serve in this and that made them sick. I know at least 3 other families on this floor who've complained about the meals here this entire month. It must have been a terrible ordeal, Shizuka nodded. And if I may be so rude as to ask, is there any way we can confirm your presence here? Raiken, Ikura gestured behind him and the boy smiled tentatively at them from behind the corner. He was with me all night, holding back Rika's hair as he threw up all over the bathroom. And let's see, old man shouted downstairs at the reception desk. He's always down there, and he can tell you that the last time he saw us was late yesterday afternoon. That's very helpful, Shizuka nodded and tapped her finger against her leg. We're done here. That was good. He really needed to use the bathroom and maybe they would have enough time before their next assignment to hit up the lamb spice shop that opened up near HQ. We're very grateful for your help, Ichiro-san. We've intruded on your hospitality long enough, and we must get going anyway. But I haven't even offered you tea, Ichiro protested as Kanria stood up, knees pooping and joints cracking. Maybe next time. Shizuka smiled and got to her feet as well, chakra stick thumping against her hip. It was a pleasure meeting you, Ichiro-san. Kanryu gave his normal farewell nod and headed out the door, just in time to see Shizuka give the poor boy lurking in the background a smile and suggestive wink. They're cute when they're like that, Shizuka laughed, shutting the door closed behind her and sealing it with a sharp twist of her chakra. Kanryu rolled his eyes. Can't get any men your age so you've stooped to robbing cradles now. Is that how it's going? Oh hush, Shizuka said, scribbling subjects 1472A clear, no follow-up recommended onto her notepad. Or we're gonna go spend our lunch break at Rico's cafe. No need to get nasty, Kanria said grimly. The old head likes touching me in inappropriate places too much for me to ever feel safe eating there. She pinched your butt once. Shizuka laughed. The last man I saw touch you without your permission ended up in the hospital for a month and a half, Kanria sniffed. I was being nice, Shizuka said, and she was admittedly right. The poor bastard right before that one had ended up permanently disabled. Lamb shop on Sakurai Street? Now we're talking, Kanria said and twisted his heel against the cool stone floor, turning rock-solid ground into a silk-smooth puddle. It felt pleasantly warm and dry against his bare feet. Next stop, lunch. Why is it that you're the one always initiating the burrowing jutsu? Shizuka complained, but she grabbed his arm all the same as they sunk into the ground, sucked in by a gently swirling vortex of molten stone. And you always do it funny, it makes me dizzy whenever I get out. No side-along comments while I'm working a jutsu, Kanria snorted as they disappeared into the earth, the liquid floor instantly hardening into solid rock where they once stood. You're scheduled to leave in a few days, the Chunin commented idly as she looked over their papers and stamped them with the official seal of the Ministry of Borders. Why so early? We're all out of stock actually, Riku grinned, tossing his braid over his shoulder and giving her a wink. And we're a little homesick for real mountain air after a month here. Any plans on coming back? The Chunin smiled coyly, leaning against the desk so he was afforded a better look down her shirt. Maybe, Riku said, and with an elegant twist of wrist, wrested the papers out of her grasp and back into a worn leather pouch. What do you think about summer in a year? The Chunin laughed, loud and bright, throwing back her head to reveal the smooth curve of her neck. It's a miracle how you get any girls at all if that's all the smooth talking you have, she said. Riku wiggled his fingers at her. Ah, but I've got the magic touch. The Chunin's bright grin turned salacious. I'm beginning to see why, she said huskily. Riku, Icarus shouted from the front of the wagon, impatiently flicking the reins. Put it back in your pants and let's get going. Riku gave her a regretful look and tucked his leather pouch away. Next time, my fair ninja lady? We'll see, she said, amused, and waved him away. Riku hopped up onto the wagon with a bounce in his step, jostling elbows with Icarus as he fought for space on the front seat. It only took a sharp tug and a click of Icarus' tongue to get them rolling and out of the Wagakure for the first time in almost a month. Genma visibly slumped forward, tension practically leaking out of him as they drew farther and farther away from Iwa's gates and towards home. Tired from flirting? Kakashi asked, feeling the faintest tendrils of genjutsu tangle themselves around him and hide the gates from view. There was a reason guides were only needed to bring people in and not out. Just tired, Genma said, pinching his nose and rubbing his temples. Got a massive headache that refuses to go away. Kakashi gave Genma a sidelong look. He was deathly white underneath his tan, with great dark bruises under and around his eyes. Kakashi wondered if those were lingering after effects from being in such close range with Gari's Kekkai Genkai. You're pushing yourself too hard, Kakashi quietly observed. You shouldn't have healed my leg last night. It's a necessary allocation of resources, Genma said immediately. You're the captain and you're the only one who knows how to get us out of this shitshow intact and back home. You're our only medic, Kakashi said and flicked the reins, even though Jean hardly needed the direction or the motivation. And Reidu is the most critically injured. Genma jerked his head towards the back, though it was covered by a tent of oilcloth, hiding Reidu and Tenzu from view. You now, back during the war, I thought they were, not joking, but you know how it is with soldiers. Seeing it for real, in person. He shuddered. I don't even know how Tsunade-sama managed to save so many of his victims. You did good, Kakashi said and felt Genma start a little next to him, shoulders tensing. We're all still alive, Kakashi said and pressed closer against Genma. You did enough and more, soldier. Kakashi felt the way Genma relaxed, inch by inch, and started to lean against him. They sat in quiet silence for a long while, passing through empty canyons with nothing but the sound of Jin's hoofbeats beating in counterpoint to their hearts. Kakashi pushed them harder and faster as the air changed, turning wetter, the ground growing soft and lush with moss. They had erased all traces of the wagon and cut the horse loose some 50 miles back, close to a civilian homestead, and ran like proper ninja with nothing but the wind in their faces and chakra willing them forward. Tenzu ran point, arms streaming behind him like twin blades cutting through the wind, and Kakashi followed up with Reidu on his back and Genma guarding their rear, the two steady points of chakra that anchored Kakashi in the mind-numbing run towards the end. Hours passed in this mind-numbing state, legs growing leaden and tired as they pressed forward relentlessly. They were only an hour's hard run to the border when everything fell apart. In the span between one heartbeat and another, Kakashi felt his grasp on the world shatter. He slammed to a sudden stop, tightening his grip on Reidu to keep him from slipping. Automatically he breathed in, searching desperately for the two anchors that kept him tethered. Ahead, Kakashi could see Tenzu's porcelain white cat mask, Chakra's signature fluttering and beating in confusion. On his back, Reidu's much slower and fainter signature washed slowly at the edge of his senses. That only left Genma. Tenzu leapt past him and down onto the ground where Genma lay, crumpled in on himself. Genma, are you with me? His limbs were splayed like a broken doll's, face white in the reflected moonlight except for the great ugly big bruises circling his eyes. Kakashi carefully laid Reidu down on the ground next to Genma, and called forth a spark of lightning to his fingers. Carefully, he brought his fingers over to Genma's still face and Tenzu automatically drew back. He gently flicked open Genma's eyes and checked the pupils. Blown and unequal. Kakashi extinguished the light and reached down to pinch and twist Genma's earlobe. No reaction. Pulse faint and irregular. What's going on? Kakashi didn't answer and instead tilted his head to the side, brushing aside Genma's hair to reveal deep purple bruises behind Genma's ears. With delicate fingers he probed the base of Genma's skull and felt a slight depression near the bottom, right near the border of his occipital and temporal bones. Brain bleed, Kakashi said grimly. And it's a few days old, judging by the bruising and the state of his pupils right now. It's been 4 days since the fight with Gari, Tenzu said, horrified. You can't mean he hasn't. It's a miracle he's lasted this long, Kakashi said, quiet, remembering that brief moment when Genma's head had snapped back and hit the ground while cushioning Reida's impact. We're so close to grass, if we could just carry. It's hard enough with Reida on my back as it is, Kakashi said. Carrying Genma would just slow us down even more. You can't mean we abandon him to his fate, Tenzu hissed, shoulders tight. Not quite, Kakashi said and pulled his dog tags over his head. He held them out expectantly. Take this and run to the outpost we have by the grass fire border. But, this is an order, Kakashi said flatly. Take my tags and run and get reinforcements. Grass is small enough that you can cross it in a few hours if you run hard enough, and we're close enough to the grass-earth border as it is from here. They'll have enough power there to use summoning transports to get here. Kakashi could see the Adam's apple in Tenzu's throat bob as he swallowed. Do you understand, soldier? Sir, yes sir, Tenzu said and he took the tags. Good. We'll be waiting. Tenzu saluted, fist over his heart. There was no better farewell than the sight of him dissipating into thin air, inky black cloak fading away until the only thing Kakashi could see was Tenzu's ghoulishly grinning cat mask, until that too disappeared into the night. Are you ready, Uchiha Shisui? Shisui held the mask up in the light. It looked surprisingly plain and ordinary looking in the fluorescent light, nothing like the mask of terrors that haunted every small child's nightmares, dripping with the blood of strange enemies. As ready as I ever will be, Hokage-sama, Shisui said and slid the mask over his face, securing it with a chakra string. He blinked, adjusting to the heavy weight of porcelain pressing against his face. You go with my blessings and the hopes of our village, Sandaime-sama said slowly, smoke-roughened voice especially hoarse. No pressure. Shisui tried to grin but the mask was too heavy and strange on his face to allow for any expressions. He settled for saluting instead, bowing deeply as he went down on one knee. You have asked for no better pair of eyes, Hokage-sama, Shisui said and rose up. I'll end this, one way or another. Sandaime-sama said nothing and watched as Shisui instantly vanished without even a disguising puff of smoke or leaves to hide the disturbance, living up to his nickname. He waited in silence for a few moments, before clearing his throat rather loudly in the empty room. You may come out now, Uchiha-kun, he said gently. Itachi stepped away from the corner, shadows dripping down his front and pooling at his feet until his entire front was revealed. Trace bits of inky shades still clung stubbornly to his hair and the curve of his jaw, giving him a faintly sinister appearance. Hokage-sama, Itachi bowed. I have done as you asked, Sandaime said. Mere words cannot express the depth of my gratitude. Itachi flicked a finger and the darkness at his feet seeped into the floor and faded away. Itachi paused and the unnaturally smooth facade of his face rippled. He is very important to me, Itachi continued, with some difficulty. If there were any other way, the Sandaime began and then stopped. Mere words could not express the depth of his regret and sorrow. If only, Itachi said and closed his eyes. Sandaime suspected it was to hide the Sharingan. Or perhaps tears. He was not sure. Kakashi woke up, drowning in a pool of his own blood. He gagged, trying to deal with sudden influx of memories rushing in from the death of his watch clone. Bile rose up in his throat. He instantly spat it out, and at the intruder hovering over his face. Muscle memory propelled chakra through his fingers, calling up the burning white lightning that left blue streaks in his visions. Kakashi thrust forward blindly, and was rewarded with a sharp hiss and the smell of burning fat. Retreat, retreat. Kakashi scrambled backwards, feeling the comforting solid stone at his back and shoved his forehead protector up. Color bloomed into existence as Obito opened his eye and Kakashi recognized the telltale shock of white hair and round glasses. Kabuto. Kakashi bared his fangs and went in for the kill. Hard steel bit into the fleshy part of his palm but he pushed forward, lightning crackling in his palm and cauterizing the wound shut instantly. He wrapped his bare hand around the blade and pulled. The intruder grunted in surprise and Kakashi brought his other hand to slam against bony ribs, hearing the satisfying crack 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 as costal cartilage smashed under the force of his blow. It earned him a sharp whine of surprise and Kakashi growled, making sure to grind his fist even harder into bone and blood. Fingers scrabbled helplessly against his arm but Kakashi paid it no mind. He flipped the blade in his bloody, chakra-blazing hand and held it against the fuckface's throat. Hello, Kakashi said, glorying in the stink of fear and pain rolling off of Kabuto in waves. That's very rude of you, dropping in unannounced. Kabuto whimpered, looking strangely young and vulnerable, round glasses nearly twice the size of his face. Kakashi frowned. This was Kabuto. He had the gray hair, the glasses, even his chakra moved the same way, sickly sweet and twisting in strange patterns that gave him a headache if he tried to focus too hard on it. And yet baby fat still clung to his cheeks, and he was nowhere near as strong as Kakashi remembered. Please, Kabuto moaned piteously. Please don't hurt me, oh please, oh please. Of course, Kabuto would be 10 years younger here. Kakashi had no idea how old the boy truly was back when Kakashi had first met him at the Chunin exams. But he looked about 12 or 13 here, round face only hinting at the hard plains it might become in the future. What was he doing here, in this godforsaken part of the country? Please sir, I didn't mean to. It took only a moment's hesitation and Kabuto opened his mouth, spewing out a cloud of poisonous gas that burned Kakashi's eyes and nose. He flew through a series of one-handed seals and blew it away with the strength of the north wind, watching in deep satisfaction as the jutsu also tore mercilessly at Kabuto's skin. The wind faded away in a few moments, leaving only a battered Kabuto leaning against the wall of the stone cave for support, armor torn to shreds. Who the hell are you and what are you doing here? Kabuto gave him a flat, unreadable look that sent uncomfortable shivers down Kakashi's back. We could do this one way or another, Kakashi said and waved the blade in his hand, sending a single spark of lightning through it. How did you know I was here and what do you want? Something in Kabuto's face shifted and Kakashi doubted it was the physical threat that made him twitch. He could only guess at the strange machinations of the child standing before him. Was he working for Orochimaru? Akatsuki? Kakashi tracked his every movement with Obito's eye and committed it to memory. I've been sent by a collector, Kabuto said slowly, in a sweet little boy's voice. It made Kakashi's teeth itch and hackles rise. Keep talking, Kakashi said. He knows of your reputation as the copy ninja. I was sent to acquire your Sharingan. You wouldn't be the first, Kakashi said and flicked the blade in his hand, splattering blood onto the floor. As you can see, I still have my eye. I am, admittedly, not your match in a physical fight, Kabuto said and then paused. Slowly, carefully telegraphing his movements, he pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Your teammate in the wolf mask currently has a basilar skull fracture, suffering from severe internal bleeding and increased ICP. If he doesn't receive treatment in the next 3 hours, it is almost certain he will die. Your teammate in the tiger mask is suffering from hypovolemic shock that is guaranteed to decompensate in the 10 hours and has a developing infection that's threatening to go septic. Kabuto smiled. I can heal them, he said, in exchange for your Sharingan. Chapter 10. There was no point to stealth anymore. It was only out of habit that Kakashi silenced the sound of his footsteps, but both he and Kabuto remained in view as he crossed the width of the cavern, blade abandoned behind. Kabuto's smile grew fixed as Kakashi came closer and closer, but otherwise did not move. He stopped only inches away from the slender boy, close enough that he could see the fluttering beat of Kabuto's heart in his throat, close enough that stink of fear and excitement overwhelmed nearly everything else, except for the coppery tang of Raida's blood. I am willing to heal your own injuries as a demonstration of my capabilities, Kabuto said, licking his cracked lips. I understand your hesitations, of course. But these are the terms of my services. Kakashi closed Obito's eye. Bolstered by the absence of the Sharingan, Kabuto's eyes glittered. I even came with a modified biosynthetic prosthetic suited to match your own. You need only to give up this one thing, in order to save your teammates. Kakashi tilted his head. Will you let them die just for the sake of your reputation? Who do you work for? There wasn't any hesitation as Kabuto smiled slowly, the only movement he made under Kakashi's stony gaze. Every second you waste, the more difficult it will be to render care, he said silkily. Decide quickly, Hatake Kakashi, and if I decide to keep it, Kabuto stared back boldly, belying the sour stench of fear leaking from his pores. Then the lives of your comrades rest upon your shoulders, he said very softly. Kakashi sighed and rocked back on the balls of his heels. All right, he said, looking down blindly at his feet. All right, he said again, fingers clenched into a tight fists. I'll do it. Kabuto straightened, hands coming up to clap as a beatific smile crossed his face. Excellent choice, Hatake-san. My master will be very pleased with your cooperation. He stepped forward, arms spread as if to embrace Kakashi. Kakashi snarled and made his move. Raw chakra exploded from his right fist as he punched straight through Kabuto's invitingly open torso, blood and fat vaporized into a fine mist. His hand tore through layers of muscle like wet tissue paper, instantly cauterizing the flow of blood even as soft wet organs burst under the pressure of his strike. Kabuto's young face, still round with baby fat and pink-cheeked, looked up at Kakashi uncertainly. Chunks of flesh dripped unsteadily from Kakashi's clenched fist as it emerged from Kabuto's back and onto the floor, an odd counterpoint to the soft patter of rainfall outside. But the profile, Kabuto said blankly, as if the pain from the blow had still not quite registered with him. The profile said that the odds of you accepting were very high. Kakashi gave him a grim smile. The profile was wrong, he said, voice deadly, and drew back his fist. Kabuto gasped and his legs suddenly collapsed underneath him, as if the strings controlling his limbs had been cut. There was a harsh crack as the back of his head snapped back to hit hard rock, glasses skittering away on the ground like a frantic spider. No dash! Kabuto breathed raggedly, one hand scrambling madly for the lenses. The other clutched at the ragged hole in his stomach, glowing a faint grass green under the lurid coating of blood. None of that, Kakashi said quietly as he stepped on Kabuto's wrist, feeling bones snap. The fingers froze into a mockery of a human hand, fingertips curved into claws. He ground the glasses into a fine dust underneath his heel, watching Kabuto's face grow winter pale. You won't be needing those anymore. Kakashi hunkered down into a crouch and pulled a kunai out of an thigh holster with his left hand. His right hand hung uselessly by his side, skin burned to a crisp and still dripping blood. Carefully, with neat economical motions, he used the blade to angle Kabuto's glowing green hand away from his body and pinned it down onto the ground, kunai buried to the hilt through his palm. They will die because of you, Kabuto whispered faintly, voice rough from pain. You will live with your Sharingan and with their lives forever hanging over your shoulders. You're right, that would have worked on me, Kakashi said, looking down at Kabuto's face. It looked even younger without the glasses, dark eyes round and fearful. But you see, I'm not the same person I was a few months ago, Kakashi said, pulling out another kunai. I know who you are, Kabuto. The boy's face whitened even further, the black of his eyes stark against his pale skin. And I mean to eke out every ounce of pain I can from you, for deeds past, present and future. Kakashi leaned in, pressing the razor-sharp edge of his blade against the tender skin of Kabuto's throat. A thin line of blood welled up, trembling, before trickling down into the hollow of his collarbone. Tell me who you work for, Kakashi said, leaning in close enough that he only had to whisper to be heard. The kunai slid down, scraping Kabuto's skin before it hit the bone of his broken ribs, flesh stretched taut between the jagged edges. I'll know when you lie. Kabuto gave him a sickly smile. You can try. Shadows wrapped serpentine arms around Kakashi's eye, instantly blinding him. He growled and scrambled forward, hands clamping tight around Kabuto's throat through instinct. What did you do? He pitched forward into darkness and knew no more. Shodai Sagaballs, I'm getting too fucking old to be doing this at my age. A hot gust of air ghosted over Kakashi's face. He could smell old pipe smoke, ink and the faint remnants of last night's curry, filtered through the blood-stained mess of his mask. And underneath it all, a deeply familiar scent that lit up his fog-stuffed mind like a beacon. I promised the kid bodies and I got him bodies, the voice continued to mutter, Cotton whispering quietly as a body settled down next to his side, radiating heat. Intact mind is another thing entirely. Kakashi's eye snapped open and he caught the fingertip hovering just inches away from his mask. Oh ho, guess who decided to join the land of the living? Jiraiya rumbled as he gently disentangled his hand from Kakashi's shaking grip. You know who you are? You're dead, Kakashi said blank. Ah. Jiraiya scratched his head and slapped his thigh. Damn it, I really did scramble your brain. Kakashi struggled to sit up, flinching away when Jiraiya tried to lend him a hand. His wide eye absently took in the wet tile floor he was lying on, covered in hundreds of seal characters winding circuitous routes throughout the room. The effort took the wind out of his chest and he hunched over, wheezing. Easy there, kiddo, Jiraiya said, rising from his crouch and hovering worriedly over Kakashi's head. Didn't bring you back just to have you expire in front of me. Kakashi looked down at his shaking hands, at the battered metal backing of his ANBU issue gloves. Grit and mud caked his nail beds, old blood flaking in the lines of his fingers. You're not dead, he said, wondering. Right in one. A heavy hand settled on his shoulder and Kakashi looked up at Jiraiya's battered old face. There were less lines than he remembered, but the Toad Sage looked much as the same as Kakashi last saw him, 10 years in the future. That was right, Kakashi was in the past, and in the past Jiraiya was alive. Kakashi swallowed hard and clasped Jiraiya's hand with his own. It's good to see you, he said, voice hoarse. Has it really been that long since we last saw each other? Jiraiya asked, a little bemused. I thought we bumped into each other at the old man's office a couple of months ago, during one of the festivals. The one honoring the new shrine consecrated in the village grounds. Kakashi gave him a lopsided shrug. Perhaps his old self would have remembered, but the last Kakashi had seen of the man was at his own funeral, face grim and lined in his official portrait, draped with black ribbons. But first, a couple of questions to make sure I didn't knock your head too badly around during the summoning. Who am I? What is the last thing you remember? And what is the last date you can recall? Jiraiya-sama, interrogating Kabuto and the 15th of the harvest moon. Kakashi reeled off instantly. Ah, so that's the mysterious gray-haired fellow we found, Jiraiya said, leaning back on his heels with a thoughtful look. Not exactly part of the summoning ritual, so it was a surprise when he popped in with the rest of you. Kakashi traced the curve of a seal character by his knee, coolly admiring the strength and clarity imbued with every stroke of chakra-imbued ink. Jiraiya's work was as masterful as always, carrying a more than striking resemblance to Minato-sensei's old work. It was comforting to be surrounded by such familiarity. The characters for space-time, stabilized by the horse and crescent construct, the curves of a summoning contract magnified 100 times and altered to accommodate subjects in the physical plane, instead of astral. You summoned us across half a country, Kakashi said slowly, a sense of awe mounting deep inside his chest. Maybe more. Are we in grass? Clever boy, Jiraiya said fond. But how did dash? Timing, as you know, Jiraiya informed him, eyes glittering madly, is everything. Imagine my surprise when I popped by the outpost, cooling my heels with a spot of tea, when a half-crazed ANBU drenched in sweat and dead on his feet from chakra exhaustion hurtles into the building, demanding a battalion of troops as reinforcements for a stranded ANBU team in Earth Country. He made it, then, Kakashi said, shoulders sagging in sudden relief. What about the rest of my men? Jiraiya's face stilled for a moment too long before it smoothed out into a fierce grin. Alive, which is more than I could say for you when I caught sight of your sorry ass. Ah, Kakashi said, and let him have his lie. Alive was enough for now. It had to be. Didn't sound like there was enough time to gather up men and head all the way back. So I thought, why not summon you all? Only Jiraiya was nonchalantly think of summoning an ANBU team across half a country. Why not indeed? What did you even use for a focus? Jiraiya stood up and trotted over to the center of the room, where 3 circles were outlined in a dark reddish-brown dried blood. Your dog tags, he explained, pointing at the first one. The second circle, Tenzu's medkit, stocked and stitched personally by Genma. In the last circle lay a heap of tattered black fabric, dark with blood and sweat. Namishi was tough. No obvious material available, so your boy stripped his clothes off in hopes that maybe even a little of Namishi's blood was on it. Risky, Kakashi said softly. It worked, Jiraiya shrugged. They're upstairs right now, being seen to. Kakashi's left fingers curled into a tight fist, nails digging blood-red crescents into the meaty flesh of his palm. And Kabuto? You were holding onto him pretty tightly, which is how I'm guessing he was pulled along for the ride. Jiraiya's dark eyes were hard and unreadable. He's not to be trusted, Kakashi hissed, bringing his fist up in a tight arc in half-remembered motion. Kind of gathered that, judging from the way you were choking what little life he had out of him, Jiraiya said, voice dry as a wind country desert. He's in max security, with every kind of chakra suppressant they have in this place. Kakashi forced in a deep breath, ignoring the agony flaring up deep inside his lungs. Good, he said, as steadily as he could manage. The grass outpost meant resources, a hot bath, food, and time to regroup and think about his next move. There was time enough to focus on Kabuto and figure out who was controlling him, and what for. Rough mission? Kakashi gave him a lopsided grin under the mask. I guess you could call it that, he said. Keep yourself together, alright? Jiraiya straightened his back all the way, wincing as joints popped and crackled. I'd like to know that the next time I see you won't be at the wrong end of an ANBU mission. Take some time off, put yourself on the teaching rosters and take on a team. Live a little. My newest book just came out last year, you know, branching out into a new genre. I think you'll like it. I'll get you a copy once we get all sorted out from this mess. I know, Kakashi said, deeply enjoying the gobsmacked look on the older man's face. I've read it a few times over by now. It's good. Merciful heavens, Jiraiya muttered, rubbing the stubble on his weathered face. Are you even old enough to read that kind of stuff? Kakashi hesitated, wondering now how to even calculate his age. Was he still 30? Or 20? Or perhaps the trick of it was to add up the numbers. Old enough to drink, even, he compromised. Jiraiya humphed, crossing his arms over his chest, sharp eyes missing nothing. Like the law ever mattered to you, he said. Alright kiddo, let's get you upstairs and into the hands of a medicine. Don't want you bleeding out on this damned floor. And once you're settled, I've gotta get going. Old man's probably gonna chew my ass out for being late. Are you going back to the village? Kakashi winced as Jiraiya placed a steady arm around his shoulders, grateful for the support, as he struggled to get his legs moving. His right arm dangled helplessly by his side, chakra coils completely blown out. His left was hardly better as he used it to lean against the wall. Politics, Jiraiya spat, his thick bushy tail of hair nearly blinding Kakashi as he turned his head. Looks like it's gearing up to be a real nasty fight between the council and the Uchiha. Kakashi's heartbeat stuttered to a stop. What do you mean? He asked thickly, mouth going numb. Uchiha Sasuke, Fugaku's second son. Well, sounds like he's gone missing and the Uchiha are blaming Tenzu. The old goat's denying everything, of course, and the Uchiha aren't happy. The counselors are upset with the Uchiha for making baseless accusations. Knives are being pointed everywhere, and the old man's convinced that Tenzu's gonna use this somehow and blow up the whole village, maybe even engineer his way into wearing the old hat. Jiraiya blew out a gusty sigh. Wouldn't get a scraping loudly on the tiled floor. It's a fucking mess is what it is. Sasuke's gone missing? Jiraiya clattered to a sudden stop, gripping Kakashi's shoulders tightly. Oh, stay with me here. What's wrong? Sasuke was missing. Kakashi closed his lone eye and felt the entire world vanish beneath him. Brat. I did not risk my life to save your fucking ass only for you to die in front of me. Kakashi, he'd come all this way and it was going to be for nothing. Kakashi! Snap out of it, damn you! Is there a medic out there? Medic. Sasuke was most likely dead, Tenzu was going to have his massacre, and the pact that he had killed himself to save was gone. He should have never left for this godforsaken mission, never let them out of his sight. How could he have been so stupid as to fall for the trap, with Kabuto lying in wait? Kabuto. He opened Obito's eye, Tomo swirling lazily in a pool of blood red. Jiraiya's face moved in slow motion. The span between each eye blink was a small eternity, each breath containing a universe of meaning. Hundreds and thousands of possibilities sprang forth into being, until past and present and future became one amorphous being, held in the spinning infinity of Obito's gift. Let go of me, Kakashi said softly. Are you mad? We need to get you to the infirmary. Jiraiya, Kakashi said, his voice deathly cold. Don't make me repeat myself. Slowly, reluctantly, Jiraiya moved away. Kakashi read 1,000 emotions in the old man's face and dismissed them all instantly. Kakashi, what are you doing? Kakashi looked down at his charred right hand, still clenched in a bloody and blackened fist. I'm going to finish what I started, he said. Tell me, where is the prisoner being held? Captain? Kakashi didn't bother to slow down, trusting Tenzu to catch up with him. You're leaving behind a trail of blood, Tenzu said, voice pitched low enough so that Jiraiya, who was following behind at a distance, wouldn't hear. Kakashi didn't bother to answer, instead giving his subordinate a quick once-over to make sure the medics cleaned him up. His hands were freshly bandaged and there was a little color to his cheeks, though the great purple bruises under his eyes nearly took up half his face. Did you get your medkit back? What? Tenzu's hand moved automatically to his waist. Yes, of course, but if I could borrow it for a moment. Kakashi held out his left hand. Captain? There was a long silence, filled up by the sound of Jiraiya's wooden geta clacking against the floor. Tenzu unclipped the pouch at his hip and slowly handed it over, deep furrows etched into his brow. Kakashi came to a stop as he accepted it, and flicked it open as best he could with the same hand. He dry swallowed 2 soldier pills, spitting out the plastic wrapping onto the floor, then picked out a tiny vial of stimulant and a hypodermic needle. I'm going to need you to assist me with this. He caught Tenzu's wide brown eyes and added calmly, I will make sure that they see fit to restock your supplies. Tenzu sputtered. That's not the point. Captain, you haven't slept in days, your chakra reserves are probably running low. Your fist is a bloody mess, and you've just been pulled through a long-distance human summoning. The backlash from that kind of space-time manipulation should put you in bed for days, let alone all the other injuries you have. You need rest, not whatever it is you're doing right now. Kakashi looked at him and said nothing. Jiraiya snorted from behind. Face it, kid? Kakashi's gone off his rocker. Jiraiya-sama, Tenzu said wretchedly. You've got to do something. Jiraiya opened his mouth, paused, and then shook his head. I don't think anyone can stop him at this point, he said, in a very different tone of voice. Kakashi gave Tenzu a level look. Well? Tenzu swallowed hard. Promise me you'll see a medic, he said. After this. Yes, I will. Kakashi lied and watched in silence as Tenzu drew up the vial with steady hands, golden liquid pooling in the glass tube. Kakashi hardly noticed the prick of the needle as it sank deep into the muscle of his arm, instead focusing on the smoky streams of artificial chakra starting to flow through his body. It's done. Good. Kakashi gave back the kit and flexed his left hand, controlling the fine tremors that were already beginning to surface. It was enough. They had stopped at an intersection, white walls physically unmarked to confuse possible intruders. Kakashi flicked Obito's eye open, checked the chakra markers, and turned the corner to face the broad expanse of an empty wall. With the Sharingan, he could make out chakra burning deep patterns into the wall, twisting and turning like phantom clockwork gears. Another time, he might have stopped to study the magnificent ceiling work, the tiny intricate arrays that ticked in happy concert, each part adding to the greater whole. There was no time for finesse any longer. Kakashi drew his mask down and bit deep into his thumb, drawing blood. It glowed an iridescent blue, imbued with his chakra. Tenzu and Jiraiya had discreetly inclined their heads away when he pulled down his mask, a fact for which Kakashi was distantly grateful for. Stretching up as far as he could go, Kakashi moved his hand in broad sweeping motions, each stroke made as thick and strong as possible. It was only a single character, as tall and wide as a man. Release. Kakashi slammed his hand on the wall and imbued it with as much chakra as he could spare. The character lit up instantly like a torch, blinding the Sharingan. Kakashi let the tears drip down, unheeded. Cracks splintered throughout the wall everywhere the seal touched it, chakra patterns fracturing under the weight of Kakashi's command. Behind him, Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered something along the lines of "miserable little son of a bitch." "What did he do?" Tenzu whispered. "Imagine you are in a china shop," Jiraiya said, not bothering to lower his voice at all. "Imagine hundreds of delicate porcelain dishes worth more than you own life in all these nice glass shelves. In this metaphor, by the way, the wall is the china shop, Jiraiya-sama. Then imagine taking a sledgehammer and crushing everything. The wall shattered, chunks of plaster and wood and stone falling to the ground in a cloud of dust. Chakra crackled and flared in bright blue bursts like sparks of lightning in between the billowing pillars of smoke. It was as if a small thunderstorm had suddenly formed in the middle of the hallway, foreboding rain in the end of the hallway. "Ah," Tenzu said. "I see." Kakashi picked his way around the rubble, ignoring the warning sirens blazing over his head. A gape-mouthed Yamanaka clutched a stack of paperwork to her chest as Kakashi stepped into the hidden room that was revealed by the broken wall. "Where is he?" She stared at him uncomprehendingly. "Where is he?" Kakashi said again and let his killing intent wash through the entirety of the room. "You broke the seals," the Yamanaka said stiltedly, blue eyes wide. Kakashi snarled. Jiraiya breezed past him and took the woman about the shoulders, smiling broadly. "Hanako-chan. Well, you've only grown more beautiful since I last saw you." She shuddered and seemed to wake from her daze, cheeks flushing a bright red when she caught Jiraiya sneaking a look down her shirt. "Jiraiya-sama." Jiraiya rubbed his cheek where she'd slapped him, grinning. "And just as strong as I remembered too. Sorry about the mess, Kakashi's just a little overexcited. You know how it is." Hanako swallowed and looked at what used to be the wall separating the interrogation cells from the main outpost. "No, not really," she said. Her eyes flicked over to Kakashi briefly. "I know it's a pain, but we're looking for the newest prisoner brought in just now. Goes by the name Kabuto, gray hair. He's not fit to be questioned," Hanako said sharply. "He's been seriously injured and I haven't even been able to give him the full pat-down physically, let alone mentally. He could have a cyanide tooth or a mental genjutsu planted on him. It's not safe. He won't kill himself," Kakashi said flatly. "I won't let him." But she swallowed her protests as Kakashi looked at her, Obito's eye wide and unblinking. "He's in Unit 6A. Kakashi swept past her and through the doorway lodged innocuously in the corner, marked only by a small discreet seal. The rest of the room was filled with filing cabinets and desks. The only other doorway in the room had a very large and ostentatious padlock that Kakashi suspected to be just for show. The seal on the door jamb tore like wet paper as he applied a smaller release seal, thumb still dripping with blood. The overwhelming stench of bleach was the first thing he smelled when he opened the door. Everything was scrubbed meticulously clean, until he could hardly tell the wall from the floor from the ceiling. There were no windows, nor clocks nor even pieces of art on the wall to differentiate place or time. Not even light. Kakashi stepped into the small piece of eternity and headed for the only occupied cell. Kakashi pressed his bloody hand against the seal of the cell door, blasting through rice paper and ink through sheer power. The cast iron door swung inward silently, revealing a metal cot bolted to the wall, with a chamber pot secured to the ground next to it. Kabuto lay shackled to his bed, medical seals hiding the gaping hole in his middle. His chest rose in shallow, gasping motions, eyes closed as if in sleep. Kakashi bent over the sleeping boy and drew down his mask. "Hello, Kabuto," he smiled, baring his fangs. Kabuto's black eyes snapped open and Kakashi reveled in the sickly sour scent of fear. "We were very rudely interrupted before," he said and drew out a fresh kunai. "Why don't we begin again?" Even evil masterminds kept tidy offices. Shisui slipped into the room in full uniform, mask loosely secured to his hip. The desk was unoccupied, with a tidy set of invoice boxes that Uncle Fugaku had in his office as well. Bookcases filled with philosophical treatises and dusty tomes dating back to the Shodai's time lined the walls. No windows, which said a lot more about the man than any kind of book he read or the type of office furniture he used. Uchiha Shisui, isn't it, Councilman? Shisui automatically went down on a knee, fist pressed against his heart. A cane tapped steadily on the floorboards, and from the corner of his eye, he could just make out deep black folds of cloth sweeping along the ground. You may rise, Agent, Danza said formally, and Shisui pulled himself back up to his feet in one fluid motion, careful not to make direct eye contact with the man. Allow me to congratulate you on your successful admission to the Corps, Uchiha-kun. I'm sure your skills would be of great use to the Hokage and the village. Shisui inclined his head deeply. You honor me with your words, Councilman. You must be wondering why I've called you to this meeting. Sir, Danza held up a hand and Shisui instantly fell silent. No, let's not beat around the bush here. He gave Shisui a creaky smile. I'm afraid since my retirement I've grown rather tired of shinobi circuitousness. Shisui swallowed. The Sandaime personally nominated you for service, Danza said, quiet. I want to know why. Shisui looked up and at Danza for the first time, black eyes hard. I asked him, he said simply. Asked Dash? For one brief moment Danza looked astonished, before he threw his head back and laughed, shoulders shaking. You asked him, Sage willing. This sounds exactly like something Hiruzen would agree to. Sir, Shisui said stiffly. No offense meant on your part. Danza smiled and clapped his one hand down on the table. Just an age-old philosophical disagreement I've had with my friend. Well then, young Uchiha-kun, what drove you to ask this of the Hokage himself? Shisui's hands instinctively clenched into white-knuckled fists. I felt that I had the opportunity to serve the village with the skills that I had. NBU would have better use for my talents than any other mission available through ordinary channels. Oh? Danza leaned forward in his seat, face unreadable. And why not wait until you were properly nominated and presented as a candidate? Shisui looked away. My cousin, he said slowly. Perhaps you've heard of him? Uchiha Itachi? Danza made an unintelligible noise. Yes, I suppose you could say I am aware of him. He has already been nominated and sworn in to serve the Corps, Shisui said, distantly observing the fine tremors in his shaking fists, as if his hands belonged to another man entirely. At the age of 12, commendable. I am useful as well, Shisui said fiercely. I am an Uchiha as well. I have unparalleled mastery of the Sharingan not found in elders thrice my age, let alone my age mates. I too wished to serve the village in my own way. I knew that my clan would see Itachi in the Corps and be satisfied, and the rest of the village would know no better. Is there not room enough for more than one Uchiha in the service? Shisui shuddered and looked away, down at his Anbu boots. The leather was smooth and uncracked, still yet to see blood or fire. Can they not see beyond their own illusions? Danza said, and Shisui looked up, startled. The old man's eye was glittering, bright as a beetle's flashing carapace. Oh yes, he said softly. I think you'll do very well indeed, Uchiha Shisui. I'm sorry, I just don't have a lot of time, Shisui mumbled, running a hand through his greasy hair. He stared numbly at the rumbling washing machine. 2 cups of detergent, the woman said kindly, pointing at the orange bottle sitting by his feet. Oh yes, of course. Shisui bent down, fingers fumbling against the plastic handle. A thick syrupy blue liquid splashed on the ground and onto his toes, but he hardly felt it, busy pouring it straight into the drum. After a bit, it looked like 2 cups had gone in, so he dropped back onto the floor and shut the lid. Are you sure you're not being followed? Shisui jerked his shoulder over to the back, where an Aburame was busy folding his pile of jackets. The woman stiffened, metal flashing in her hands. Don't worry, Shisui said, wiping his sticky hands on his uniform pants. I've convinced him that nothing really is going on right now. Just doing my laundry on my off day like any other rookie operative desperate for clean clothes. Are you sure? She asked, voice tight. Shisui gave her a tired smile. I have to be, to do this kind of stuff. He rolled his shoulders, stretching out the kinks in his muscles. It's a thing I do, he said, waving vaguely at his eyes. I build truths and sell them to people to believe. I'm pretty okay at it, I guess. At her incredulous look he added, I try not to do it on people I like. It's not very good at maintaining healthy relationships, you know. The woman said and turned back to unloading her own load of laundry. So, how's life in the Corps? I'm adjusting okay, he said, stuffing his hands into his pocket and staring at the washing machine. My new friends just took me to a nice club down by the warehouse district. Creepy atmosphere, but it was worth it for the great mixed drinks. She raised an eyebrow. I've never lived by myself before, he informed her. It's fun. I've even been cooking for myself now. So, ramen? Baby steps. He kicked the base of the machine with the tip of his foot. Pain burst in his toes, razor sharp and clarifying. Shisui tried to hold on to the feeling. I still haven't figured out who's dating who, and all the gossip about the members keeps flying over my head, but it's always like that when you join a new group. I feel like I'm gonna be playing catch-up for a while. The woman slammed the door to the drum of the machine shut, picking up the laundry basket at her feet with a huff. Sounds rough. How are you doing with the mission quota? Shisui's breath caught in the back of his throat. I'm getting there, he forced out. I just need a little more time. Don't forget about the bigger picture, she said, hitching the basket against her hip. She tossed her long wild hair over her shoulders, giving him a coy smile. See you later, Shinobi-san, she winked. Maybe I'll take you up on that offer sometime. Call me, Shisui said dully and handed over a crumpled piece of paper. The flirtatious look on her face smoothed into solemnity for a brief second before she turned away, swaying her hips. Now that's a fine ass, honey, a man observed as he drifted up to the dryer the woman just vacated, laundry sack casually slung over a shoulder. You get her number? I saw her first, Shisui said, and his eyes flickered red for a brief instant. Right, who? The man said blankly as he set his laundry down. Are you talking to me? Shisui's mouth thinned out into a flat line. Sorry, I thought you were someone I knew. He turned away, walking blindly towards the exit. Just a little more time, Shisui bowed his head. At the sound of the morning bell, he shuddered awake and the ache in his head came back again. It was a round kind of pain, if he thought about it, big and crashing like the waves of the ocean he'd seen once on TV. But he didn't like thinking about it much, about anything at all, because it would just make the pain worse. Sleep was better. He closed his eyes. You have to get up or they'll take away your food again. Something latched onto his shoulder and shook him hard. He curled up tight into a ball and tried to ignore it. Hey! The blanket suddenly disappeared and cold air swept over his skin and made his teeth hurt, like the time he tried biting on aluminum foil. New kid! He hissed angrily and swiped at the hand. You've got to get up. I know it sucks. But you've got to start eating or they'll take you away somewhere else. Somewhere bad. Something warm cupped his face. All right? He cracked open his eyes, soft blurry shapes slowly coming into focus. It was a big kid's face looking right at him, with strange white hair the color of snow. Good, the big kid said, and he smiled, extra big and wide. Time for breakfast. For a brief moment, it was like having him back again, even if the hair was all wrong and the big kid had brown eyes instead of black. He scrunched up his eyes tight so the tears wouldn't leak out. Is he sick, Anai-san? He will be if he doesn't get his butt out of bed, the big kid grumbled. Here, grab his arm, I'll get the rest. He felt himself dragged out of bed. He flailed wildly before his leg hit the cold concrete floor and he yelped, the crashing waves in his head nearly drowning out all the other noise. I thought I told you to grab his arm. I did. He quickly wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve and peered up blearily at the two boys standing above him. The other kid was smaller, and had dark hair and black eyes and pale white skin, like his cousins. Like his family. Who are you guys? He croaked. I'm number 16, the big kid with the white hair grinned. And this, he jerked a thumb towards the dark-haired boy. This is my little brother. He's number 22. What about you, new kid? You no longer have a name. Tools do not require them. I'm 36, he said. In the darkness, under the cover of the blankets, he told them stories of the world outside. Like on TV, there's this show about samurai, except they're all different colors and they have swords and stuff. TV? 16 asked, curious. I thought it was that box they show all those boring lessons and stuff on. Like how to sharpen your kunai and stuff like that. That too, 36 said, waving his hands in the air. But it's like a box for videos and stuff, and then every Saturday morning, a video comes on about these samurai guys. 22 gave the two of them a warning pinch. He was the one pretending to sleep like a boy while 36 and 16 pretended to be the blankets at his feet, talking excitedly. Tomorrow, it would be 16's turn to sleep and 22's turn to argue over the stories 36 was telling. Sounds boring, 16 said, and there was a brief scuffle as 36 tried to punch him underneath the blankets. If it's so boring then you can go back to sleep, 36 threatened. I'm only kidding, 16 said, and they quietened. So, what about these samurai guys? Well, they're like warriors, only they don't have chakra, They just have swords and they all have their own color. And the red one's the leader. And they're traveling throughout the world to fight evil monsters and save the world and bring honor back to their old country. 16 said. 22 slowly drifted to real sleep, lulled by the stories of the Super Sentai samurai warriors and their adventures in saving the world and protecting the peasantry. Just before the finals waves swept him away into darkness, 36 told 16 a different story, strange and scary enough to keep him anchored to this world. Do you remember your real name? What? For the first time in his life, 22 heard the fear in 16's voice. Not the numbers, but our real names, 36 persisted. Like how the instructors have names like Iwato or Kazuhito. I'm sorry, 36 said suddenly. I shouldn't have said anything. There was a long silence, long and deep enough that 22 almost thought that they had all fallen asleep before 16 finally spoke up. I don't remember, 16 said quietly. Only the number I had at the old place, before they brought us all here into this big building and renumbered us all. I was 8 before and 22 was 56. I don't think he knows either. Maybe. 16 sounded unsure. I know my real name, 36 said, so soft that 22 almost couldn't hear him at all. They'll make you hurt for that. 22 could feel 36 shifting around, hand brushing against his leg. They took my ear away from me, he whispered fierce. But they can't take my name away. You're one of the dumbest, stupidest and bravest little kids I know, 22 silently agreed. He squirmed a little, wanting to know, but if Ni-san wouldn't ask. Can you tell me? 36 shivered. Promise you won't tell? I promise, 16 swore. I am Uchiha Sasuke. Chapter 11. It was easy to fall into a routine, even as some small, distant part of him recoiled from the blood on his hands, dripping from his sword, dried in permanent brown stains on his boots. This, he realized, was the true benefit of the mask, not to strike fear or to conceal his identity from others, but rather to hide from his own self. He was just one of 100 now, a faceless figure bent in shadow, with no conscience or conscious thought of his own. He considered the sharp profile of the laughing fox hanging from the hook by his bedside table, fangs bared, whiskers drawn in crimson and black swirls across the porcelain surface. He had never really liked foxes. Shisui slipped the mask on his face, pulled on his cloak, and went to work. It was the absence of noise that woke him, more than anything else. 36 stuck his head out of his bed, rubbing his eyes and restraining the urge to scratch at the bandage wrapped around his head. Around him, he could see all the other kids slowly wake up, some of them looking pale and sick like they were about to throw up, others looking more like they had to use the bathroom real bad. 16 was sitting on top of his bed, legs crossed, quiet-like. 22 sat on the floor by his side, head tilted towards the ceiling. No one made any noise and 36 thought that was the weirdest thing of all. Like all of them had the exact same lump in their throats, the tight feeling in their chests that made speaking impossible. But he had to. What's going on? He asked, his voice scratchy and hoarse, shattering the silence. Can't you hear it? 16 said, fingers wrapped tight together, like a monk making his devotions. 36 didn't really get it until 22 spoke up finally. There's no morning bell. They lay in neat rows, 6 by 6, on clean white tables with bright surgical lights chasing out all the shadows in the room, washing the color out of their cheeks. Thick black cables spidered across the room and lay attached to their heads, rippling with blue arcs of chakra that danced in time to 36 steady heartbeats. Time, Danza said slowly, thoughtfully, as he looked down at the laboratory spread beneath him, through the glass panes that separated the observatory and the room below, is something that I always seem to be short of. Shisui said nothing. He was bent on one knee, masked face looking down at the floor. He could feel his own hot breath curl against his skin, trapped by the heavy porcelain weight of his mask. The eye holes of his mask were small, black strips of darkness obscuring the edges of his vision. I had plans for the boy, since perhaps even before his conception. Danza paused, thumb rubbing the wooden handle of his cane. What better way to kill the father than with the son? He imagined Sasuke looking down at his father's corpse, grinning, with the crimson-red pinwheels spinning in his eyes and a kunai dangling from one small, boyish hand. But in this way too, he will serve Konoha as well, reborn as a perfect soldier. His mind will be molded into something new, something better. Harder, stronger. The perfect tool. Danza lifted a hand up, and the masked agent below instantly straightened and saluted, his badger mask glinting with reflected light. He stood in the center of a giant array, seal characters spiraling out from around him in labyrinthine tangles before connecting with the long black chakra cables. He had long yellow hair, tied back in a practical queue, just visible from a gap in the hood of his cloak. His hand began to fall as the agent brought his hands together, fingers twisting into seal signs. Release! Shisui shouted, his eyes bleeding Sharingan red. He tore through all the careful illusions he had gathered, striking through all of the delicate chakra strings, and let go. The agent shattered into 100 different shards of reality, falling to the ground in a heap of technicolor lights. The laboratory plunged into darkness, lit only by the shimmering pile of shattered genjutsu on top of the seal array. Before that too faded away into nothingness. Uchiha, Danza spat in a soft, deadly voice, all at once a curse and an invocation. So, this is when you choose to betray me at last? Fire roared to life from his hands, throwing the sharp planes of his face into sharp relief, casting strange shadows across the scars stretching over his cheek. The rafters of the ceiling caught aflame, shimmers of heat and waves of smoke rising up and around them in an intoxicating, heady combination. Behind them, the glass windows cracked in warning. Agent Shu? Danza continued in that low voice, perfectly controlled fury sublimated into lethality. Dead, Shisui said, and unsheathed his blade. As much as I sorrow for his loss, I cannot allow this to happen. In the name of the Sandaime Hokage, upon his request and his command, I arrest you on highest charges of treason, murder, and the endangerment of Konoha citizens. Oh? Danza laughed, a terrible noise that rose from the hollow depths of his chest. You dare accuse me of treason? Boy, what I am doing is for the good of the village, to protect it from weakness and poison. You think I don't know what your elders are planning, what Hiruzen refuses to see. Be that as it may, Shisui said as steadily as he could. The sword never wavered in his hand. That doesn't justify your actions, Shimura Danza. Will you comply with the law? And you? Danza's voice turned even quieter, harder. Your hands are just as marked as I am, child. You are blind if you cannot see that he is using you as well, his own hidden sword in the darkness. Be that as it may, Shisui said again, his voice shaking with fear, with rage, with 100 different frightening emotions. But you hurt my cousin, you bastard. He lunged forward, chakra singing in his veins. Danza smiled and drew his hands together in a seal. Now, he said, and the room exploded. Kakashi tugged open the shades of his window, letting the silver moonlight filter into his assigned room at the outpost. A laughing cat peered through the glass panes, whiskers like dark slashes across its smooth face. A hand, curled up into a fist, hovered over the glass. Had it only been a month since Tenzu had knocked on his window that fateful night, white-faced and trembling with fear? Had it only been 2 months since Kakashi had died in the middle of a war-torn future, and woken up in the scattered nightmares of his past? Had it only been 10 years that wound backwards, like water spilling up through the gaps in his fingers and back into his cupped palms? Captain, Tenzu whispered, his chakra flickering and curling in on itself. Genma, good men died, blood washed over the earth, and the world went on as it always did, time flowing endlessly forward, even here, in this improbable world. Kakashi bent his head. I know, they were gentle, if nothing else. His body was washed carefully, with soft cloths imbued with herbs and stitched with seals of purity. His hair was combed and braided into a neat queue, then tied it with a traditional white ribbon. Finally, they tied a black armband around his arm, embroidered with a silver spiraling leaf, then laid his body onto an unrolled ceremonial sealing scroll, marked with black serpentine coils of symbols. A medic, with a light touch, carefully signed Shirani Genma and bound his corpse to paper and ink, securing him for the last journey home. Kakashi closed the door behind him as he left the morgue and stepped into the attached infirmary room. He stopped in front of an empty stasis chamber, watching the chakra-infused water slowly drain through a grid in the floor, tubing laying limp and detached by the glass sides. A placard with Genma's name, water-stained and wrinkled, still hung by the corner of the chamber. Sometimes, Jiraiya said beside him, puffs of breath swirling around his mouth as he spoke, lips blue-tinged from the cold air. The body just passes on anyway, organs shut down, and the cells die off, even with a support system in place. He sighed meditatively, get a scraping on the tiled floor. Perhaps it's better that it ended this way. Kakashi observed the swirling vortex forming as the blood-flecked water circled the drain. He was too far past normal healing, he said, quiet. You don't think maybe if Tsunade had been here? No, Jiraiya said, his voice almost unbearably kind. Not even she could have brought him back. Kakashi felt something almost like hysterical laughter bubble up in his chest, choke the breath out of his lungs, squeeze tight around his heart like a vice. How could have had thought dared to presume that 10 years of experience, 10 years of fucked up failure would have been anywhere near enough to fix his own mistakes in the past? The past was never the problem. It was always him. He hadn't been good enough, not now, not then, not even in the future, with Pein standing over corpse and his students scattered across the remnants of the world, broken and shattered because he wasn't enough, was never enough. Sasuke was missing, Reidu was barely clinging to life, the Uchiha massacre was growing more and more likely, and now, perhaps worst of all, Genma was dead. Kakashi tasted copper and salt on his tongue as something warm settled on his shoulder, chakra flowing from it in steady waves. "Don't you even think about collapsing on me, boy," Jiraiya snapped, his voice sounding as if it came from a long distance. "Get your shit together." Kakashi dimly realized that he had bitten clean through his tongue, blood pooling in his mouth, staining the cracks of his teeth. Unsteadily, he dragged his tattered mask down and spat onto the floor. It splattered across the white tiles in jagged crimson drops. Jiraiya's hand pushed harder against his shoulder, guiding him towards a chair by the far end of the room. Kakashi followed almost helplessly, his limbs moving of their own accord. He couldn't stop looking at the nearly empty stasis chamber, at Genma's name. He sank into the chair at another nudge, heady waves of chakra still flowing through him from Jiraiya's steady, unwavering touch. "Kakashi, Shirani Genma. What is your name, rank and registration number, soldier?" "Hatake Kakashi, Jounin of Konoha, registration 009720, Kakashi said automatically, the familiar, well-worn words spilling out from him. "At least you're not catatonic," Jiraiya said, voice just a touch wry. He knelt down, his mane of spiky gray hair filling up Kakashi's entire vision. The stasis chamber and its attached placard slipped out of view, obscured by the bulk of Jiraiya's chest and his massive chakra presence, lurking in his bones like a banked fire. "I've only seen you like this once before, Kakashi, and it was just yesterday for a few seconds, right before you went on a cold-blooded rampage and nearly murdered the prisoner." Jiraiya's chakra flow slowed to a trickle, but Kakashi could feel it surging through his parched chakra coils, fire affinity calling to fire. "I need you to help me understand, Kakashi, because I don't know how to reconcile this man sitting before me and the one I saw a few months ago at the festival. You look the same. You wear the same blacks, the same A&BU armor. But I swear to the heavens and the Sage of Six Paths, you're not the same person. What changed? What's going on right now?" How strange, Kakashi thought slowly, that he had been to this man's funeral and now Jiraiya was alive. How strange, that Genma had been alive and now he would have a funeral in this mixed up, fucked up hell of a past. "I was supposed to save them," Kakashi said dully. "My kids, my pack, my team. I couldn't. I can't, because I'm not good enough." Pain cracked like a whip across his cheek, burning bright like a lightning strike. "I've already seen one Hatake walk down this path, and that's one too many. Don't you dare follow your father into the darkness," Jiraiya said coldly, his hand still raised from slapping Kakashi's cheek. "You can't blame yourself for events out of your damned control, brat. Shirani died a good death, a soldier's death in service to the village." A white-hot fury burned the fog out of Kakashi's mind, lent his leaden limbs sudden energy. "You don't understand." "You're damned right I don't," Jiraiya shot back. "I know this isn't the first time you've had a teammate die on you, but it is the first time I've seen you lose it like this. What's different this time? Why is it fucking you up like this?" "Because it's not just Genma, it's Sasuke, it's Naruto and Sakura, and the whole damned Uchiha clan. It's Danzo and Root and Akatsuki," Kakashi spit furiously. "I came back to try and save my pack and all I've done is just make everything worse." Jiraiya's mouth didn't quite close. "I need you to untangle that for me," he said, after a long moment. "How is Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto of all people, involved in all of this? And Fugaku's missing son? And what's all this about Danzu and an AK whatever? You coming back?" The transfer, or time travel, or whatever the hell Kakashi was supposed to call this, it had never really been a secret, only difficult to explain. It had been easier instead to assume the role of his younger self, to pretend to be something other than he truly was and then make his own quiet moves to change the future. In the shattered remnants of his failed plans, Kakashi didn't know quite what to say. "You're really doing a splendid job of convincing me you haven't gone completely off your rocker," Jiraiya said, a touch of a half-hearted smile curving his mouth. "It's complicated," Kakashi said finally. "And I'm not sure if you really will believe me anyway." "Something would be better than you just staring at me like this," Jiraiya said, raking his hand through his thick curls. "Or are you going all quiet again?" he added in a very soft voice. Kakashi stopped and cleared his throat. "I am actually 30 years old. Somehow, I've managed to travel back in time and enter my younger, 20-year-old body." Jiraiya choked. "From my own personal recollection, in 1 year's time, Uchiha Itachi will murder every single member of his clan, save his brother, Uchiha Sasuke, in order to protect the village from a coup engineered by his clan. In 6 years' time, when I was, or will be, 26, I was assigned a genin team consisting of Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto, and Haruno Sakura. The team subsequently fell apart due to my own inadequacies, Kakashi said, letting his voice fall into the rhythmic cadences he normally used to give reports, distant and detached from the circumstances. Sasuke betrayed the village to join with Orochimaru and later killed his brother, and made several attempts on his former teammates' lives, and mine. An organization composed of missing Nin also made several attempts on Naruto's life and on the village in order to extract the Kyuubi's chakra. The head of this organization, known as Akatsuki, eventually breached Konoha's walls and invaded the village. I died during the battle and found myself waking up, here, 10 years in the past. Silence wound tight between the two of them, straining towards a breaking point. So, Jiraiya said, his brow deeply furrowed, clearly struggling to absorb Kakashi's words. That's why you flew off the handle when I reported Sasuke's disappearance. And an invasion of Konoha, of all the possibilities. His voice trailed off, his face settling into an unreadable mask. Kakashi felt a sudden exhaustion wash through him, the furious, frustrated anger from before quickly dissipating. He was tired to the bone, weary, and above all, frightened of what the unknown future might still bring. I can definitely see why you thought I wouldn't. Why I don't believe you, Kakashi. Time travel? Jiraiya shook his head. Talking sage toads and prophecies, I can do, he muttered. But this stuff? He blew out a rough breath. I can show you your funeral, Kakashi said. Jiraiya stilled. With heavy, numb fingers, Kakashi drew up the borrowed chakra within him, Jiraiya's own chakra, and wove an illusion made of memories and old dreams. Watch, he said, and opened Obito's eye to let Jiraiya see. Even without Obito's eye to etch it into memory, Kakashi could still remember the way his former blacks felt on his skin, how they smelled of mothballs and scented detergent. It was a hot, humid summer morning, with only a few clouds in the sky. It was a beautiful day. A framed picture of Jiraiya lay in front of the memorial, lined with black ribbons. Here was a much more familiar face than the living man standing beside him, a little older, with deeper wrinkles and laugh lines. Next to him, Jiraiya swore softly underneath his breath. The illusion shifted and changed, revealing Naruto's bent back, the heaps of chrysanthemums laid in a mound in front of the memorial. He looks just like Minato, Jiraiya said haltingly. You took him on as your apprentice. Later on, Kakashi gestured toward the two squat frogs sitting by Naruto's side. He learned how to summon toads, among other things. Fukasaku and Shima. Jiraiya started, his face growing pale underneath his deep brown tan. There's no way you've ever seen them before. This is all just an illusion, not a memory. Kakashi finished for him and let the strands of chakra go. Reality rippled into place around them, the hot summer day fading away to reveal the sterile white walls of the outpost infirmary. Jiraiya was on his knees in front of him, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. At any other time, the look on his face might have almost been funny. Now, all Kakashi could feel was fear. Now you see what's really at stake, Kakashi said, his voice slow and bone-weary. Sasuke's missing, and I know that Tenzu is involved in this whole mess, instigating and maneuvering himself into power. We're maybe days away from the massacre happening again. His head sank into his palms, Obito's eye throbbing endlessly behind his battered Konoha band. I'm still not exactly sure what's going on, but I know this. Something hard and solid collided with Kakashi's skull. Blue and white stars shot across Kakashi's vision as Jiraiya ground his fist against his head. You idiot, Jiraiya said, but his gentle tone was at odds with his words and actions. Kakashi flinched, too stunned to do anything more than blink stupidly at Jiraiya's face. Let me guess, this is the first time you've told anyone about this thing? Kakashi nodded dumbly. And let me make another educated guess. You thought you could handle this all by yourself, huh? This time it was Kakashi's turn to look at the other man, his mouth ajar. Not your team, your ANBU squad, not me, and definitely not the old man Hokage, right? Jiraiya sighed, his black eyes full of a warmth that Kakashi couldn't understand, his thoughts fracturing and spinning into 1,000 incomprehensible fragments. Have you ever thought, Jiraiya continued in that same tone, that we might even want to help you out? You don't have to solve all the problems, save the entire world all by yourself. His fist flattened out, his hand now ruffling Kakashi's spiky silver hair as if Kakashi were a boy again, to chide and lecture. Teamwork, Jiraiya said simply. Kakashi's eye began to prickle with heat as he closed it. Underneath his Konoha headband, Obito's eye began to weep. Now, Jiraiya said fiercely, let's figure out how to get back home and kick some asses. The Sharingan saw the world-shattering moments before it truly happened, enough time for Shisui to throw every ounce of chakra he had into the most important body flicker of his life. With the Sharingan, he saw Danza mouth something seconds before his lips even moved, catching the minute muscle movements of his face, projecting and evaluating and calculating in less than a heartbeat's moment. He passed by Danza's fleetingly open torso and crashed through the glass pane separating the observation room and the laboratory just as the ceiling began to tremble and cracks began to appear in the earth. Now, Danza smiled, and the room exploded, stone and fire raining from the heavens as the ceilings and the walls of the entire building began to collapse in on themselves. Shisui dropped his sword mid-jump and his hands blurred through half a dozen seals dizzyingly fast, pouring everything he had into the jutsu. Sasuke's face looked up him in peaceful, drugged sleep, as debris rained down around him and all of the other children, lying as still as corpses in the collapsing lab. "I'm here, cousin, I'm here," Shisui wanted to shout, even as his lungs filled with smoke and ash. He landed on the floor and slammed his hands down onto the ground. The laboratory erupted as blue waves of chakra rippled out from the epicenter of his hands, waves of earth reaching up and around to create a perfect dome to shield the children. A perfect darkness fell inside the room. Shisui flinched as he felt the ground beneath and around him rumble and shake as the explosion continued on outside of the dome, bits of buildings and chakra fire raining down onto his construct. Sweat trickled down the back of his neck as he fueled even more energy into the jutsu. It would have been easier, much easier, just to protect Sasuke, to spirit him out of this building and run like hell for safety. Shisui looked over at the rows and rows of sleeping children, his Sharingan detecting 36 beating hearts, 36 flowing chakra signatures lighting up the dark earthen dome with a beautiful luminescence that only the Sharingan could see. There was no way he could leave all of them behind. Distracted, he stretched his senses to cover the entire room, checking over the integrity of his construct, the lives of his 36 little charges. By the time he noticed the tiny chakra signature at the southern section of the dome, it was too late. It collapsed open with an ugly sound, letting a fiery light into the dome and casting long shadows over quiet, sleeping faces. The sound of falling rocks grew louder, great slabs of concrete cracking open the earth and causing 100 little small tremors every moment. Danza stooped a little to step into the gap and into the broken dome, wielding Shisui's sword. A root shadow hovered at his heels, chakra-hardened blades in their hands. "You disappoint me, Uchiha," Danza said, his craggy face set into an unreadable mask. "I rather expected more from you than this." Shisui spat onto the ground in answer. "Well," Danza said unruffled, "that's what you get for allowing your emotions and morals to cloud your mind and your duty. If you'd been smarter about this and abandoned the children, you most likely would have been able to escape with your life." "Fuck you," Shisui said, quiet. "Sure," Danza said, no longer smiling. "Finish him, but leave the eyes intact. I want to harvest them." The shadow detached itself from Danza's heels and leapt at Shisui, blades dancing wickedly with reflected firelight. Shisui looked up at the cloaked figure, the sliver of white mask visible in the dim light, and waited for the right moment. Touch was the simplest, easiest way for genjutsu to take hold in the subject. Sound was tricky, required extreme focus, and was notoriously inefficient considering the chakra use. Eyesight was unreliable and only best worked when in combination with Dijitsu, and even then, results were uncertain with the Sharingan. Shisui needed only his own chakra. The root agent jumped in the air and towards Shisui, blue flickers of light blurring in the air as the dual blades wove a dangerous steel web. Shisui lifted one hand, the other still linked to the construct through the ground, and made one half seal. The shadowed figure fell onto the ground like a rock, blades skittering onto the ground and landing with a clatter in front of Danza's feet. Shisui staggered as his chakra levels grew dangerously low, lost to the Sharingan, the costly construct he was maintaining and struggling to rebuild with every bombardment, and now the genjutsu to dispose of the agent. Danza looked down distastefully at the ground and the crumpled figure of his tool. "Filth," he said in a low voice. Shisui struggled to control his hard breathing, his hair now completely drenched in sweat and plastered to his scalp. "He deserved a better master than you," he said, his free hand clenched into a tight, white-knuckled fist. "At least it was a quick, painless death." Shisui had used an illusion that heightened the fear and adrenaline of the individual to a lethal level in less than a heartbeat's span. The heart usually collapsed within a few seconds. "I've heard rumors of your abilities." Danza stepped forward slowly, his gait even and strong even without the use of a cane. Or perhaps, Shisui slowly realized, his thoughts muddled by chakra exhaustion, Danza had never needed it in the first place. But to see proof of it in person is quite different. He lifted the sword in the air, pointing it steadily at Shisui's heart. "All I do for Konoha," he said, his voice solemn, and let the sword drop. Shisui tensed and lifted his free hand into another half-seal, gathering the remnants of his chakra within himself to prepare one final illusion. Danzu stepped forward and Shisui watched in horror as the Sharingan read Danzu's movements towards Sasuke's table, his body anchored to the ground and to the dome construct he was sustaining. Shisui wasted precious seconds looking over at the other children, the Sharingan registering the weak flow of their chakra, then back over to Danzu's advancing figure, Shisui's own sword growing closer and closer to Sasuke's heart. If he left his spot, the dome would collapse, unable to withstand the force of the collapsing building without his constant chakra support. The children would die, some crushed, others slowly suffocating in whatever small pockets of air that would form. If he didn't, Sasuke would die. Deep down, Shisui knew he had already made the decision, long before this moment ever came to pass. He tore his hands up from the ground and threw himself into one last body flicker. Around him, the dome groaned as it slowly began collapsing. The sword passed through Shisui's ribs, scraping against bone and punching through his lungs. Shisui doubled over Sasuke's body, his back curved over the little boy's face, as he coughed blood onto the floor. "Useless boy," Danzu said softly. "You've always been predictable." Shisui grinned up at him, flecks of bloody foam ringing his bruised mouth. "Yeah?" he said hoarsely. "Surprise, motherfucker," Shisui laughed. The dome above them stopped trembling and began glowing a powerful, blinding iridescent blue, stone quickly knitting back together in one cohesive whole. Danzu ripped the sword out viciously, and Shisui nearly blacked out from the pain, blood bubbling up in his throat and his chest as he felt one lung slowly collapse. "How did you dash?" Danzu roared wildly. Stars and dots swam in Shisui's vision as he gasped desperately for air. "Did you really think that I would attack you without alerting someone for backup?" he wheezed. "The cavalry's finally arrived, asshole. You better run now if you don't want to get your ass caught." Even with the Sharingan he could barely even see Danzu's outline anymore. Distantly, Shisui thought it must be the blood loss, the pain and maybe even oxygen deprivation robbing him of sight. Even more distantly, Shisui thought he might be dying. "Your eyes, at least I can have your eyes." Shisui managed a shaky grin as he instinctively palmed a kunai in hand from an arm holster, as easy and familiar to him as breathing once had been. "No," Shisui said, and blinded himself. The world, Shisui dreamed, was on fire. Or perhaps it was fire. Shisui found that he could no longer care about the difference. "Amaterasu of the heavens, answer my prayers, please, damn it, Shisui, wake up, please, Shisui dash." Ah, Shisui thought. Perhaps there was one last thing in the world he did care about after all. "Itachi," he whispered, lifting a hand up to his cousin's face. "Oh, Shisui, your eyes," Itachi wept. Shisui could feel the hot salty tears trickling down his little cousin's face. "Sure," Shisui comforted him, tracing his thumb over Itachi's jaw. "Sasuke? Safe, he's safe, they're all of them safe," Itachi said, his voice shaking. "All 36 of them, Shisui, you big damn hero." "Good, good," Shisui sighed and his hand dropped. It was as if in that one breath all the energy in his body had suddenly left him. Kurenai, Shisui searched his fleeting thoughts for what he once had thought important, but now seemed lost in the void. She has the intel. Faded memories of a red-eyed, wild-haired woman at a laundromat briefly came to mind. "Yuhi Kurenai?" Itachi's voice grew harder and sharper. "She was your handler for the mission." Itachi had always been clever. "I'm sorry, Itachi," he finally said, his voice growing fainter and fainter as he struggled to hold on long enough. "For leaving you, like this." Shisui could barely feel the tears falling down from Itachi's face and onto his own. "It's alright," Itachi said. "It's alright, just hang on for me, okay? We're on our way to the hospital, just hang on, damn it. Don't leave me." Shisui smiled, one last time.